Hello, everybody. I would like to welcome you all to this World Water Day event, which is organized by the Montfort University in Leicester. And it's a great pleasure to be actually taking part in this event because without water, we cannot survive. 70 to 90% of the human body consists of water. And indeed, 70 to 90% of all living organisms contain water. So water is such an important molecule in our life, and therefore a day dedicated to the World Water Day is really needed, and it is very important. So to start off the presentation and today's discussion, I have a glass of clean water in my hand. And I'm really, really lucky that I'm living in a country, the United Kingdom, where we have access to clean water. I can just go into my kitchen and turn the tap on and I can get this water, and I'm drinking this water in front of you. Unfortunately, it is very sad that while I'm drinking this water, there are millions and indeed possibly billions of people who do not have access to clean water. They do not have access to water even for washing their hands or washing their bodies. So we live at a time where the most abundant molecule on the surface of this planet, water, is not accessible to millions, billions of people around the world. And therefore, there is greater need for an awareness, greater need for discussions, greater need for debates about water and why we have such problems with water. Water has been a problem throughout history, but with advances in science and technology, one would have hoped that the problem of water would be reduced and we would have more accessibility to water around the world, not just here in the UK, where I can just quickly go and get a cup of water, glass of water, and drink it without any problem, without even thinking about that being an issue. So really, we need to discuss and debate to understand why this problem exists. Now, today I'm going to discuss some research that we have been doing at the Montfort University to try and see how we can provide clean water for some of the poorest people in the world. And the research that we started goes back more than 15, nearly 20 years ago. And it started off with a plant called water hyacinth. And today we have some excellent researchers who have worked with me. Some of them, all three of them actually are my PhD students. Two of them have already finished and have moved on. And one of them is just about to finish his PhD, has submitted his thesis. So today we'll have some glimpses of research that we have been doing in order to address the problem of clean water around the world. But I also like to make suggestions and actually create thinking and more awareness about why we are having this problem when we are so advanced in science and technology. It took us only 6 months, maybe perhaps, to produce a vaccine, a life-saving vaccine, which is now being rolled out around the world. It took us 6 months to do that. And yet, water, the fundamental molecule of life, we cannot provide access to that to billions of people. These are questions that we need to ask and think about. So now I will start my slides. And so can I have my slides, please, so that I can discuss with you all about what my presentation is going to be all about and what work we have been doing. So in the first slide, it's just a title, Tackling Water Pollution with the Water Hyacinth Plant. And the next slide that you can see here is a slide that shows you some indications regarding the problem of water, lack of water access. So on the left-hand side of this slide, you can see that billions of people around the world still lack access to clean water. So 2.2 billion people lack safely managed drinking water. These are information from the United Nations. This is not things that I've made up. 2.2 billion people lack access to safely managed drinking water. And with the rise of, this is before COVID-19, and the situation hasn't got better. As a matter of fact, the need for water has increased because of COVID-19, because now we are telling everyone to wash their hands as much as possible and as often as possible. And nowadays, in the days of the pandemic, we have 3 billion people worldwide who lack basic hand washing facilities at home. 3 billion. I mean, that's an amazing number. 3 billion people worldwide lack basic hand washing facilities at home. And this is such a horrific, worrying statistics, because COVID-19, we know, spreads through hands and when in contact with surfaces and so on. So washing the hand is such an important thing. So Really, we need to ask ourselves why this problem, why we have such a big issue with water. And the sad thing is really is that we are not primitive in terms of science and technology. We are not short of money. And indeed, we are searching for water in distant planets. We are going to planet Mars or other places, distant planets, millions and hundreds of millions away from planet Earth. We are going there to search for water. And yet, we are not doing enough research to provide clean water to humans in our own planet. That is the sort of irony of all of these things, that we have the technology, we have the science, we go to distant places to look for water in other planets, but we cannot do enough work to provide clean water or do enough research to find ways of providing cheap, inexpensive clean water to the humans that inhabit this planet. And that is sad, and we need to change this. So I've already said billions lack safe drinking water and hand washing facilities. But as someone who has been working on proteins and water for several decades, I want to give you some interesting statistics. If you look here in this section here, I've done a search to find out how many publications were published on water from 1970 to date to 2021. And we find there is about 3 million articles published on water. So 3 million articles where water was mentioned in the abstract of those articles. Compare this with proteins. The number of research articles on proteins is nearly 4 million. Over 1 million more articles on proteins compared to water. And that I find quite astonishing. And the reason for that is that protein is one of the molecules that you find in our body amongst many other molecules, nucleic acids, DNA, carbohydrates, fats, and so forth. And our cells contain 70 to 90%, even 70, 80, 90% water. So water should be the molecule that should have been most researched because it is the most abundant molecule. Indeed, a protein cannot form a structure. A protein cannot form a structure without water. A protein cannot function without water. Therefore, one would expect that even when you study proteins, you have to consider water. And indeed, all biological reactions take place in an environment that is containing water. And therefore, lack of research on water is just quite puzzling to me. And I think we need to change this mindset. And I think this is a human sort of like attitude. If something is available in plentiful supply, if something is abundant, or even a human being, if you see this human being everywhere, he's always there, he's always doing things, he's always seen, then you don't give that person that much importance. And I guess the same thing happens with water. Water is everywhere. I have a glass of water in my hand and I can just turn on the tap. It means that we sometimes don't value things that are in abundance. And yet these abundant materials are what actually shapes us, what actually is absolutely critical for our survival. And therefore, whilst it is good to go to the other planets to do new research and find new distant planets and look for life on new planets and so on, but at the same time, we must invest money and effort and research activity on finding solutions to providing clean water. I do not think that is an impossible task for the human race to achieve. And water covers 70% of the planet's surface, and it's the most abundant molecule in cells. So we really need to do more about the problem of water pollution. Now, I have to say something about my interest in water in terms of drinking water came as a consequence of learning about the fact that the world's largest mass poisoning of a population in history has been occurring in Bangladesh, a country in Asia with a population of about 160 million, the world's largest mass poisoning. And this is because people have been drinking contaminated groundwater. If you can see on the right-hand side, there is a woman who is pumping out water from the ground, and this water is laced with arsenic, which is a toxic chemical, which can be deadly in terms of causing cancers and other diseases. And unfortunately, people have been drinking this water because it was believed that the groundwater is safer compared to the surface water, because for centuries, for thousands of years, people in that region, India, have been using surface water for their drinking purposes and so on, from ponds and from rivers and so on for drinking. But people were advised to switch from the surface water to groundwater. And that has led to deadly consequences, actually, with millions of people being affected with different sorts of disease, increased in mortality, diabetes, and different types of cancers. And this was a consequence of not really looking into the quality of the water before telling the people to drink it. there should have been some testing done to know if the water was safe to drink, but it wasn't. And so from 1970s onward, many millions of people have been drinking contaminated water. And it's not just the drinking water, because water, as you can see from this slide, is part of the entire food chain. It's involved in irrigation of crops. It goes into the soil, and water can get contaminated from industrial activity, from the environment, and from natural rocks and minerals. Chemicals can leach into the water, and then this can then go into the food chain. This is a complex diagram. I don't want you to go into the details of this, but this was produced by one of my PhD students, and it really shows the different level of interaction between human and the environment, and the consequences in terms of contaminated water can have on human health. And there is a huge area of research that needs to be done in this area, and it's a highly interdisciplinary field. And this is the type of research we are doing, trying to find how we can provide safe water, and also to reduce arsenic pollution, and to provide foods that are contaminated with arsenic, that are free from arsenic contamination. How we can reduce arsenic contamination in foods, find foods that have low arsenic content, is one of the areas that we are trying to investigate. And finding ways that are easily used by communities do not have access to the most advanced technology. This is another issue, something that is sustainable and using materials that are locally available. So different dimensions of thinking has been applied in our research. Now, as I have mentioned, today's lecture is going to be on the use of water hyacinth for as a material, as a plant for arsenic remediation from water. You can see here a picture of a boy someone holding arsenic water hyacinth plant. It has a long root, and the lectures coming up from Jonathan Jones, Dr. Ed Brima, and Dr. Adilopo, there will be more discussions about this plant. I won't go into the details at this moment, but the interesting thing, it is the fastest growing aquatic plant in the world. So it's the fastest growing plant in the world in terms of aquatic plants. It has got long roots. It doubles their population in 2 weeks. It's considered to be an undesirable weed called the green plague. 50 million tons of water hyacinth are removed from the White Nile annually. Millions of dollars are spent on water hyacinth control. However, our research has shown, and indeed some of the research that others have also done have shown, that this plant can be highly effective in removing arsenic and other toxic elements from water. So this is a form of phytoremediation, using plant to remedy a problem in the water, in the environment, to remove toxic elements from water, from drinking water. And we have been doing this research now for nearly 2 decades. So the water hyacinth plant has a very negative image as an undesirable weed. But a weed is no longer a weed when human imagination can be applied to find a good use for it. And this is what I strongly believe. If there is something plentifully available in the environment like water, then it must have a good use. It must have a good role to play. Likewise, I also truly believe that water hyacinth, although a weed and is highly available, it can multiply in numbers so quickly, will have a useful role. It's just that we have not imagined or have not done enough work or paid enough attention to understand it as much as we should. With the water molecule, I've already told you that so little research is done on water, and water is the fundamental molecule of life. Likewise, this plant, we have not done enough work on it. And in due course, when more research gets done, we will see that it is a valuable resource for mankind. And that is why it can multiply in numbers so quickly, and that is why it is available so widely. So in this presentation today, I also have a sad note, a sad message, and it's a tribute that I would like to make to my former PhD student who did his PhD under my supervision. He also did his MPhil under my supervision. And it's a great loss to humanity, to mankind. It's Dr. Shaban Al-Ramali. He did his PhD, and unfortunately, he passed away at the age of only 54 earlier this year. So we lost a great scientist because he was the first person, actually, and that I need to stress and point out. He's a great scientist because he was hardworking, dedicated, honest, reliable, trustworthy. He worked in the lab in an honest way, and I can rely on his work. He would work carefully. He would make sure everything is accurate, and he will repeat his experiments and again until there is reproducible data and so forth. And he was the first person actually to show that dried water hyacinth roots. So you dry the roots of the water hyacinth plant, and then you can make form a powder from it. And you can see from this graph here, what Dr. Shaban al-Ramali did was that he showed that over 90% of the arsenic is removed from water in few minutes, and it works at different pH ranges, as you can see. So he was the first to show that water hyacinth has a great potential, and the root of the water hyacinth, the plant, the dried material, because sometimes the water hyacinth, the living material, may not be available. So you can store the plant when it is available, you can dry it, and you can produce powders from it, which you can then apply as a type of in filters and other ways to remove the arsenic and other toxic metals from water. So I would like to make a tribute to Dr. Shaban al-Ramali. My condolences to his family for the loss of this great man, but his work and his research work will live on, because he has paved the way for new research that is continuing, some of which we will hear about in today's presentation. So the next point that I like to make in this presentation is a recommendation, really, on the basis of research we have done, on the basis of our studies with the water hyacinth plant and its effectiveness in removing arsenic and other toxic metals from water. And we've shown that with a British river. So we've shown that in situ, we've shown that in a real world situation, where we've taken the water hyacinth plant, and then we've shown that when you place it in a polluted river, it can actually reduce and remove some of the most toxic elements that you do not want to have in your water. And what I believe that can be done in Bangladesh very effectively is to remediate the polluted rivers, the canals, the ponds, because ponds are an integral part of Bangladeshi way of living. Any house, before it is built, people will build a pond. They will dig a pond, and that will be the pond that will supply them with water for drinking. It will also contain the fish, which will be valuable for the Bangladeshi people's diet, because the Bangladeshis are known as rice and fish makes a Bengali, mache bate Bengali, which means rice and fish makes a Bengali. So this was part of the Bangladeshi culture, but unfortunately, recent times the number of ponds are declining. People are filling them up because of these tube wells, because tube wells were installed throughout Bangladesh, and these are providing water to the people, but they're difficult to install. In some places, the arsenic content is very high. So the groundwater, we know, because you are sort of like tapping into the groundwater, and the groundwater contains lots of heavy metals, arsenic and other toxic metals, and these are being picked up with the water. They're also expensive to install. Often they do not work and they go wrong, and so people go into difficulties. So there is a lot of problem with these tube wells that use groundwater. So the groundwater is the main problem in terms of arsenic toxicity. This water hyacinth can also be used to treat the arsenic contaminated groundwater before it is drunk by humans or consumed by animals and so on. So the groundwater usage is becoming an increasing problem, because there is a depletion of groundwater. Groundwater is being used not only for drinking, but also for irrigation, which is leading to the entry of arsenic into the food chain, into the rice. And that is why the Bangladeshi population is highly, living a very risky lifestyle. They're getting exposed to the toxic elements that are being brought from under the ground, and they're drinking it, and they're also irrigating the land with the contaminated water, and the rice is getting contaminated, and they're eating the rice. So there is a whole chain of events that are occurring that is leading to the human body becoming overloaded with toxic metals from the groundwater, from the drinking water, and from the rice. And therefore we need to find solutions. And I think we need to go back, and the Bangladeshi population probably would like to go back to the days of the past. And that is what I'm saying, that the Bangladeshi government can develop a strategy and water management strategy which makes ponds, which are called in Bengali language pukur, make ponds once again an integral part of water supply, community life, and Bangladeshi culture. The number of ponds are decreasing. People are filling them up. Instead of doing that, people should increase the number of ponds, because there are many reasons for doing that. And I've actually listed that on this part of this slide. If you look at it, I've just sort of thought of the different reasons why we should have these ponds existing in Bangladesh and not fill them up. And I've listed them one by one. First of all, ponds in Bangladesh provide water for human consumption and for consumption by animals. And it's been doing that for centuries, for thousands of years. Water in the pond is used for bathing and cleaning, washing clothes, washing utensils, cooking utensils, and so on. It's also a source of education, and this is something that people have not discussed. And I thought deeply about it, because as someone who actually grew up in Bangladesh, I learned how to swim by going into this pond. That's how I learned to swim. How did I learn fishing? I actually learned to fish, from this pond. And I also learned how to ride a boat from this pond. So the pond was not only something for drinking water, it served for bathing and cleaning, for education, physical activity, swimming. Swimming is such an important physical activity for the health of anyone that this pond provides the opportunity to swim. And then fishing. Lots of people have lots of different types of fish in this water, and the water hyacinth actually provide an opportunity for the fish to feed on. It's also a space for relaxation. You can see this is the structure that normally, if you look on this diagram here, this photograph here, you'll see this is how people will sit around here in the evenings or in the morning. They would come here, they will chat, they will discuss. So it's a cultural and social dimension. It would bring the people together. They will sit and talk. Some will be swimming, some will be fishing. All of these activities are integral part of the Bangladeshi culture, which is now dying or slowly disappearing because of the installation of tube wells, which are actually not doing good on the whole because of the contamination of the groundwater by arsenic. And there is also a role in culture and social interaction, as I just mentioned. But another point that I need to also highlight, and this is very important because Bangladesh is actually one of those countries which is most affected by climate change because it's a low-lying delta, rising sea level, and also increasing salinity, and there is huge number of problems that Bangladesh faces because of climate change. These ponds can reduce, also flooding is a big problem in Bangladesh, and these ponds can reduce flooding because the runoff water, would normally, when there are no ponds, would go and completely flood the area and the communities and so on. But these ponds provide a sink for the water to go and settle, and therefore they reduce flooding. And another important point to point out is that ponds can absorb more carbon than a woodland. So this pond has so many valuable contributions and so many different ways that can serve the Bangladeshi population. And I really strongly believe that going back to the pond culture and making ponds integral part of the community in terms of its cultural life, in terms of its social life, and in terms of providing water and even nutritional life, I think is something that urgently needs to be done. And water hyacinth was always there in the ponds. Even when I was using the ponds, the area where the water hyacinth were, the water would be very cool, it will be pristine, it will be very clean, because the water hyacinth plant is mopping up all the contaminants that are in the water, whether it is from cleaning the utensils or from the soap and other chemicals that might get into the water. The water hyacinth is actually soaking up all the bad guys from the water. So you're having more pure water because of the water hyacinth. Of course, it needs to be controlled and regulated. So the water hyacinth can be an integral part of these ponds to provide clean water, and it can also serve as food for the fish. And finally, the water hyacinth that are beginning to sort of like overwhelm the pond, before it goes to that stage, the water hyacinth plants can be harvested, they can be dried, and they can be used for fuel generation such as biogas and other applications. In some countries in Africa and in Asia, people are producing baskets, producing shoes, producing bags from the water hyacinth plant. The usage of water hyacinth plant is increasing all the time. So I do not think that water hyacinth is going to be a problem if we know how to utilize it in an efficient way and control it before it becomes a nuisance. So finally, my World Water Day message, and actually I want to say this because there is a man that I really admire, because I've grown up watching his program, and he has been an inspiration. I mean, he has a wonderful voice, he explains things so nicely, and in the UK, he is highly admired for his nature programs. David Attenborough, he said something that I think is highly relevant on this Water Day, because trillions and trillions of gallons of water is wasted every day. Every day we're wasting water and we are not thinking about it. And that is really, really sad, because water is such an important and precious material. We should not waste it. And what David Attenborough said, although he did not specifically mention water, but it actually applies to water as well, because it's an important human resource. He says, you can do more and more the longer you live. But the best motto to think about is not waste things. And this is such a valuable and important advice, which we should consider in our daily lives. So my personal message to everyone on this World Water Day is as follows. Do not waste water, and do not waste the water hyacinth plant just because they are abundant. Both water hyacinth is abundant, and water is abundant, just because they're in abundance, do not consider them as useless, do not consider them as something not worthy of caring for. Do not waste water, do not waste water hyacinth, find good uses for them. Definitely more investment and research is needed to provide clean water. We need to go to other planets, we need to go and search for water in other planets, but let's also make serious efforts to provide clean water in our own planet which we inhabit, and make this a better place. The future of water hyacinth, in my view, is a great one. And in my view, this is what I like to say. And one day this, I think, will come to the realization in due course. It's already beginning to be seen that this plant, which is considered to be a green plague, it will no longer be a green plague, but it will be a green gem. And this is because human imagination will find ways to coexist with it and find good uses for it. So this is my final slide. And what I like to do now is to introduce the three speakers who will be speaking today. All three of them have been studying under me, have done or doing PhD under my supervision. And they're brilliant scientists in their own right. And they've started doing different types of activities in their own research. And they are doing work on water hyacinth. And I would like each one of them to present some of the work that they have been doing. And first of all, I'll have Jonathan Jones, who is doing a PhD with me on water hyacinth and using water hyacinth to actually clean up a British river. And he'll discuss about the potential of this. He's done some amazing work and published his work as well. And I'm really proud of his achievements. And he will be the first speaker to discuss his contributions in the field of water hyacinth research and the contribution in purifying water. The second speaker will be Dr. Ed Brima, who is also someone who did a PhD under my supervision and has now moved on. And he's a research fellow, senior research fellow at DMU. And he's working on water hyacinth plant. And he has done some exciting work on developing a household-based filter based using water hyacinth. And finally, the final speaker is Dr. Adilopo. And he's also a brilliant scientist. He's also done his PhD under my supervision and some of my other colleagues at the Montfort University. And he's also doing some very nice work on the water hyacinth plant in Nigeria at the community level. So they have all interesting presentations to make, and we'll listen to them. And after the lectures are over, we will have a panel discussion followed by questions and answer sessions where everyone out there who is listening to this event can make contributions by asking questions, and we will do our best to answer your questions. So thank you for participating in this event. And without taking more time, I will ask our next speaker, who is Jonathan Jones, to start his presentation. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Professor Haris. Good morning, everybody. Obviously, Professor Haris has covered there the potential uses of water hyacinth in removal of what are poisonous heavy metals. So this is just a very quick canter through some work that we did on a British river using the live water hyacinth plants to actually look at their potential in removing pollutants from a real river. So if I move on to the first slide, as Professor Haris mentioned, water hyacinth plant is probably the fastest growing plant on the planet. But it has some attributes that are ecologically remarkable and therefore make it very attractive for use in phytoremediation. It's free floating, it's fast growing, it has a very long and hairy root structure which extends to quite a significant depth in the water column. You can see the picture on the right there, that just shows a young adult plant, and you can see the sort of depth of roots there. It has a very high tolerance to a wide range of environmental conditions, and it can remove a wide range of substances. On the flip side of that, and as Parvez alluded to, it's highly invasive, and for that reason, it's banned in the EU. And it's important to point out these experiments were conducted prior to its ban by EU legislation. But as was said, it costs millions of pounds or dollars globally annually to try and physically and mechanically control this plant. It causes damage to waterways. It can cause environmental harm. It can block intakes to renewable energy schemes and things like that. But on the flip side, it has all these unique attributes that make it ideal for doing something good, which is akin to, really speaking, the sort of thing like cancer treatments, where we can use poisons effectively to treat and cure cancer. So this short presentation is hopefully going to demonstrate the important potential of the plant, in contrast to the disbenefits that it brings, that have been covered. So in relation to this study, it was conducted on 3 levels as a proof of concept study, to look at the ability to remove real pollutants from an actual river in South Wales called the Nant y Fendrod. You can see a section of the Nant y Fendrod to the top right there of the slide. And then ultimately where it ends up in Swansea Bay, which is a bathing water in the city of Swansea, and which is a heavily urbanized city that the river itself flows through. The river is currently failing to meet good status under the EU Water Framework Directive, and that's because it's got high levels of zinc, cadmium, and manganese. And these are as a result of historic metal smelting activities that took place at the start of the Industrial Revolution in South Wales and extending through into the early 20th century, or mid 20th century, in fact, with some smelters smelting a variety of metals and then disposing of the waste arising from those in the valley there, and that has leached through the ground and caused this contamination. So the study was conducted, first of all, on a bench scale, so using small containers containing either the river water or synthetic solutions, then within the river itself, and then as a third study, looking at an option of treating it at the bankside using a sort of pump and treat technology. So in order to do the study, lots of measurements were taken at regular intervals, and things like pH, dissolved oxygen, conductivity, and then alongside that, a suite of 21 elements, most of them probably toxic or acutely toxic in excess quantities, and cause a wide variety of health complications and even death in sufficient levels. Arsenic there, as Professor Haris already mentioned, and things like zinc, cadmium, lead, nickel. And then for the sort of bench scale study, single metal solutions were made up of zinc being the worst offending pollutant on the Fendrod River. And this was to look at how the plant is able to remove that in the absence of other pollutants and nutrients that would be contained within the river itself, along with river water then containing the various other components. So bespoke treatment pods were produced or designed for the in situ and bankside tests, and I'll show you some images of that. And then to work out the removal efficiency of water hyacinth, it was calculated by taking the initial concentration and then minus the final concentration, divided by that initial concentration, and then times by 100 gives you a percentage removal efficiency. So first I'll talk about the bench scale study. So on the left images, you can see what was a purpose-built storage pond for the plants, which had been previously unexposed to pollutants and purchased in the UK from an aquatic supplier, as I say, prior to the ban on their import and introduction in the UK. And then on the right there, you can see sterile food grade containers then, which had either river water or synthetic solutions in, and with 2 young adult plants in each, of roughly the same weight and covering the surface of the water there. And then readings taken every hour over a 7-hour period and repeated. So I'll just show you some of the results, and you know, a lot of data there and graphs. But the key thing is there were 3 different tests taken over 3 different days. The first and second tests were over 7-hour periods, and then the third test being extended to 3 weeks, which allowed time for sort of optimum removal of any pollutants. And basically the 3 different colours in the bar charts there represent those different tests. And you can see some of the metals that were contained in the river that were removed, and that was cadmium, zinc, cobalt, nickel, arsenic, and manganese. And the chart on the right there shows you the synthetic solutions of zinc in contrast to the river water samples. And basically the takeaway from that is you can see in the 7-hour tests that removal of zinc is greater in the single solution and in the absence of other nutrients and other metals competing for absorption or adsorption. And then if I come on to the in situ study, this was conducted in the river itself. And as I said, a bespoke treatment pod was constructed using like a fishing net and frame to safely contain the plants, and then segregated into 2 sections so that a duplicate test could be run concurrent with the other. Again, this was conducted 3 separate days over a 7-hour period. And I think there was 25 adult plants used in each pod, and then samples taken hourly to look at removal rate. And again, if I show you some of the graphs, you can see here that even during such very short contact time, you've got some excellent removal of metals that are actually in the watercourse there. And you can see the metals across the bottoms of the graphs. The top one shows total metals and a duplicate sample of it. And then the bottom graphs are showing dissolved metals, which are of more interest because in the dissolved form, this is taken up by the biota that lives in the rivers, so plants and animals, insects, fish, etc. And again, you can see a wide range of metals there actually removed with almost instantaneous contact, where in the time it takes for the river to flow from upstream through that little pod and out the other end, you're getting, you know, up to 30% removal in some cases, or 40% for aluminium there, and chromium. And again, the 3 different colours in the graphs are the 3 different tests. So you can see there's, you know, similar removal rates in each of those 3 tests. And then the idea of the bankside study was looking at, you know, sort of where you'd have treatment options alongside a riverbank or any sort of wastewater treatment, where you'd have an input. The plants would be contained in a treatment pod, water flowing through those, and then obviously hopefully coming out the other end in a cleaned or purified state. So you can see there's a header tank, and water was pumped from the river itself with a little petrol water pump to that header tank into the treatment pod, which was filled with the water hyacinth plants, and then discharged back onto the flood plain there. This study was conducted over a shorter period because obviously there were a lot of logistical challenges involved, and things like permitting and the amount of water that can be abstracted without the need for a permit in a 24-hour period. And then obviously the safe control of those plants to ensure there was no escape or you know, any pieces lost during the experiments. So again, I show you some graphs that were produced from the data obtained. And again, you can see a wide range of metals removed. And, you know, again, fairly significant levels given almost sort of instantaneous contact with these plants. And you can see some of the initial concentrations at the bottom there of what those metals were. And again, over the 3 tests, similar results showing, you know, this superb potential of the plant in its living form for phytoremediation. So then I just come on to a comparison of the 3 studies, and you can see there that the metals that were removed throughout those studies, and then obviously, common to all three of them, you had manganese, cobalt, nickel, zinc, arsenic, and cadmium, all showing removal by water hyacinth plant during those short tests. And then aluminium, chromium, copper, and lead within the in-river and bankside study. And then unique to each of the studies, there were a couple of metals removed. Interestingly, antimony was for the first time shown to be removed by water hyacinth plant in this study during the in-river trials, and then titanium, vanadium, and tin. So you can see there's massive potential there for a wide range of toxic metals that are harmful to humans and any other biota. And then just coming on to some final thoughts about the work. Obviously, further testing is required and sort of upscaling of these treatment systems and to sort of apply them in a real life setting for water purification. And following the publication of some of this research, there's already been significant interest from several industrial sites and even the Coal Authority in South Wales looking at the research and potential applications in treatment of waste effluent water as well as water purification per se. And just a sort of final thought about it is to say that we need to think about it as a circular economy. Obviously, the plant is so widespread and a problem across the globe. It's costing a fortune to control and treat, and yet it's a freely available resource that is absolutely remarkable and has a treatment potential for drinking water and any other water globally that would cost twice as much, if not more, to treat using chemical methods and mechanical methods, where you've got a natural process that would do the same job, and if it were appropriately controlled. So on that note, there's just a sort of simple concept diagram there of what I could see being a treatment system that could be used, where you can see on the left there a river or any effluent plant would flow into the treatment plant. It would be insulated and isolated to give the plants the optimum growing conditions. The water would flow through that plant. And then you could even combine things such as hydropower. So where you've got a gradient or an option to use like an Archimedean screw in reverse, which would then pump the water, you could generate electricity. So you can even factor in renewable energy there. So there's endless opportunities. And, as Professor Haris said, it would be a real shame not to fully exploit the potential of this plant and use it in providing water, which as we know, water scarcity globally is a massive problem, and it's our most precious resource without a doubt. So on that note, thank you very much for listening, and I'm now going to hand over to Dr. Eid Bremer for his presentation, please.
Thank you, Jonathan. Good morning or evening for everyone, because different times in different countries. This study about design of water hyacinth-based water purification system for household and community level. This study back to is this work is about 14 years old, initiated by Professor Haris during my PhD study with him. First of all, we are going to go through the background of problem itself of arsenic in groundwater and what's causing to human health, and that's the reason why we're thinking about a solution for this problem. Global arsenic contamination in groundwater. Top 10 countries that suffer from arsenic contamination in groundwater are underdeveloped countries. And on the top of that list is Bangladesh, where potential exposed population is about 30 million. As we know, that arsenic is about 10 microgram per liter. That's a safe level recommended by WHO, which is higher than that in Bangladesh and other affected countries. Therefore, the driving force behind designing a household filter from water hyacinth is viable, because water hyacinth is ubiquitous in Bangladesh. It is economic viability, and at once disposal for everyone individual makes it attractive. Our previous research has demonstrated that a potential water hyacinth for removal of arsenic, which is published in 2014. Arsenic affected area countries of the world within intensity, shown by size of plot, as we see here. The larger the spots, that's a very high concentration of arsenic. We move on to see the very interesting one for the world map here, arsenic contaminated region superimposed on the tectonic map of the world. And this publisher here in this article, they stated that more than 90% of arsenic pollution is inferred to be geogenic. And we postulate a strong relation with plate tectonic, which is very interesting discovering for this work. So we see here there is a list of 10 types of health effects of arsenic. First of them is cardiovascular, that's heart attack, dermal hyperpigmentation, gas. There is gastrointestinal, heartburn, hematological, and that's an anemia, hepatic cirrhosis, neurological, brain malfunction, pulmonary is a chronic cough, respiratory laryngitis, and renal hematuria, and reproductive what's spontaneous abortion. This is type of health effects that arsenic can cause to human and animal as well. Other researchers also categorize this in 3 classes, like a genotoxicity, cytotoxicity, and epidemiology. Now we move on to common treatment technologies for the remediation of arsenic content water, also summarized by some literature here: coagulation, chemical oxidation, advanced oxidation process, adsorption, ion exchange, a membrane filter, that's a nanofilter, reverse osmosis are also there. So just like this, our treatment of water contaminated with arsenic is going to be one of the thing of this technology. But we thought about it because more technologies, they use chemical substance, and we use a natural one, which is going to be safe, because chemical substance can be reduced by pyrotechnic is harmful for human. A design of prototype filter based on the use of dry to water hyacinth root powder for arsenic removal from drinking water. Actually, we did this by comparing with another biomaterial, such as number one here A is dry sugar cane, and another one here is dry jute, and one in the green rectangular is dry to water hyacinth, and the last one is banana sugar, which is showed that a higher removal compared to these 3 of them. Arsenic removal from drinking water using different biomaterials and evaluation of technology-based filter. That's where what we done and published. A small quantity down to 2 milligram per milliliter of each material in the form of powder was agitated in 25 ml of drinking water, spiked with 300 microgram per liter for arsenic 3 or arsenic 5 at pH 7 for 2 hours in flask using a shaker. That's the way how we design an experiment by using this such tiny amount of each one of these biomaterial. Now by comparing the removal percentage here, a removal percentage for arsenic 3 and 5 by water hyacinth, we see that at the beginning here, 78% and 81% for arsenic 3 and 5 respectively, which is higher with other percentage of removal compared with other biomaterial. That's the reason why we choose this to be embedded in a design of prototype filter. A prototype filter was prepared from water hyacinth, that's about 20 grams, which was capable of removing 80 and 84% arsenic from drinking water, with concentration of 250 and 1,000 microgram per liter, respectively. As we know that a range of concentration of arsenic in the groundwater in the whole globe, which is the range from 0.5 to 4,000, is about 4,000 parts per billion or microgram per liter. So the design here, this is the core of our study here, design of prototype water hyacinth based filter for household and community level use, because it's used from a very key material. So the upper container is a bucket here. We have contaminated water here. Then you have, this is black spot is holes, and then here you see the black layer is a water hyacinth powder, and then a yellow one is sand, and then a red one is a brick, and then you see another holes here which moves the treated water to a lower containing water, which is supposed to have clean and very between each layer. There is a clause which is could help in preventing these layers to mix with each other, which is very key one, is available at each household that can be used, and also could help in removing bacteria. Move on to performance of water hyacinth-based filter for arsenic removal over a period of 1 week. I did test that and see the percentage of removal of arsenic here. Up to 4 days continuously working perfect, and then decrease the performance, decrease down to 7 days, 10% of removal. So the durable of working with filter is up to 40 days, which is, I think, is very nice for a household working filter. Advantage of prototype filter and performance. First of all, we can say that, state and confirm that small quantities, 20 grams of its dry truth, are sufficient for removal of arsenic from large volume, 11 liters of water. Water hyacinth is known to have fast rate of growth and spread across water, and highly abundant and obtainable biomaterial for use in a filter. Water hyacinth is abundant arsenic in arsenic affected area of Bangladesh, where drinking water is contaminated with high concentration of arsenic. The last point is that the filter can be used for removal of arsenic at household or community level in Bangladesh and other affected countries as a simple, efficient, and sustainable alternative to more expensive and other technology. As I mentioned before, because other technology also, they use some chemical which is can produce byproduct chemical, which is more concerned to human health. And this is a natural product which is more safe for human. Future work, the filter needs to be evaluated in a field level with the arsenic contaminated water to determine its full potential. Collaborative work with the governmental and non-governmental organization is needed at the field level in Bangladesh and other countries as well. So, and we work down in the future, we see also the mechanism of removal. Either this is going to be like absorption or adsorption, like applying friendly Langmuir or absorption metal model. This to know how the mechanism of the removal is going to be. Thank you very much for your attention and listening to this very short demonstration, and I hope it's going to be very useful. I will introduce my colleague, Dr. Abdul Al-Khani.
Good afternoon. Here in Nigeria is afternoon. My slide, please. Slide. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be part of the discussion today, and I will be going through the slides. The slides is on Come Wash Slum Project, a sustainable communal approach to the management of water hyacinth in Nigeria. My name, as initially introduced, is Dr. Abdulgani Adilopo. And the background here is to talk about the project, talk about the Nigerian experience in terms of slum, and also talk about the growth in slums in states, particularly the state of interest where I am, and that is the Lagos State. The Come Wash Slum project is a compact project meant to fix the nexus between waste, water, and the energy in the slum using a circular material communal-based approach. This intention of the project is to improve water quality, sanitation, and in a bid to make a circular communal use, it is generating water remediation process, and it also creates a renewable energy for the community. What are the objectives that will be carried out via this project? There will be waste characterization, assessment of impact of waste within the slum environment, life cycle analysis of the waste, and here developing a circular model that control waste pollution and also give renewable energy. And the last is to integrate the community to ownership of the project. There have been several processes in creating a solution for the management of water hyacinth, but the only problem is the dissociation between the water hyacinth and the community, and that often creates a gap in the solution and the sustainability of solution. Now, the background. The research by UN actually show a relationship between low income and poverty level and the growth of slum. It says defines slum as a wide range of low income settlement or poor human life condition, mostly in informal settlements in the urban area. It also indicates that as Nigerian population grow over period, the level of poverty increases way towards with the population growth. As at this moment, 2020, the rate of poverty is expected to grow to 60%. And this also bridge the formation of slum. The slum across Nigeria is expected to grow higher because of the rural-urban migration. We have, by 2050, it is projected that the population of Nigerians living in the urban area will be between 70 and 80%, meaning that Nigerian will be having about 120 million population living in the urban area. This would definitely cause proliferation of slum. And what happens in Lagos particularly is of interest. Why? Because Lagos is a state, one, the commercial state of Nigeria, commercial center of Nigeria. Two, it is a state beside the lagoon. It is below the sea level, and it has a lot of lagoon slum. As at this moment, we have over 13 lagoon slum. And what happened between the lagoon slum is that waste is generated. And this waste generated is also having effect on the land and the water within the area. Take a look at the population of Lagosian living in the slum. 2/3 of the 22 million Lagosians are living within the slum. And the slum is actually surrounded with water. So their anthropogenical activity is having effect on the water system. Let's see what happens to the water system when they interact with it. You could see the first aspect is what we're talking about, the water hyacinth, clogging the road. the waterways, the socio-economic aspect of the community is being affected. Then onto your left, your right, is waste dump just by the bank of the Lagos Lagoon. And this is what happened. Activity keep polluting the water system. So we've carried out the first research, which is characterization, and I've found out that there is heavy metal pollution in the waste in the lagoon area. We have also evaluated the effect of ineffective waste management within that area, and that brought into the idea of how to integrate the community in the management of waste, especially the fast-moving water hyacinth, which has a lot of effect on the community within that area. The water hyacinth project is called Water Hyacinth Come Wash Design. It is designed that the community will have a center where water hyacinth is harvested, it is dried using a solar dryer, and it is converted into a densified water hyacinth filter, which is used for purification along the water bank and is also used in the home, just like earlier researcher has shown. And the last is that the circular economy will be completed by converting this water hyacinth into briquettes, densified with other blender that would be used, that will also be sourced locally within the environment. So how does water hyacinth look? We've seen that. What we take interest in doing in our first form of experiment is to understand how to create water hyacinth process within a local environment with lesser financial involvement, because here you have to balance the economy with the research you're doing. So we take a sample of water hyacinth and wanted to understand what is the composition pattern. We discovered that the stem constitutes 73% of the water hyacinth, while the root is 11% and the leaf is 16%. What this implies is that if you want to use economic solution for it, you have to be able to generate the balance of use between the stem and the leaf. And that was an important result that we got from the first weight composition analysis. The next one is to determine how do you dry your water hyacinth and how does the moisture content actually affect the water hyacinth. We also find out that within 7 days, you can dry your water hyacinth within the room environment in Lagos, but you must consider the humidity level. The humidity level actually fluctuates the rate of loss of water within the environment by each part of the plant. And you could see when the humidity is high, you can also see that the rate of loss of water for each part of the plant actually also decreases. We also observe that stem has the bulk of the moisture content. Next is to go over it and get the mesh size needed for filtration. So we took the water hyacinth, divide it into parts, dry it open at the lab using room temperature for 7 days, then grind it and pass it through a filter of a mesh size of 0.65 mm. And what we got is what had been displayed: the roots, the stem, and the leaf. The next procedure is to test each aspect, what is the absorption capacity of different aspects of pollutant within the water system. We therefore use the tube system in evaluating each of the parts of the water hyacinth. That is the tube system used. We loaded the tube, a 50 ml burette, with just 0.2 gram of dry water hyacinth and took a leachate from within the area, eluded through the park, and you could see here that even the cotton wool is white, showing that the cleaning system is mainly affected by the root system. And what you have is a clean filtrate of the leachate. Now, we decided to look at the chemical parameters. Interestingly, within 10 minutes, 15 mils of leachate eluded through the root of water hyacinth had actually been transformed in terms of physical parameter. And that you could see that about 60 to 70% for each of the parameter determined had actually removed pollutants from it. The turbidity, the conductivity, and the color parameter have all already been affected positively, showing the potential of what could be removed if this process is adopted with little expenses in terms of money. Now, we plan to use the result of this experiment to cumulate into our packaging and the processing of a layer volume of water hyacinth and an higher volume of the dump site leachate that will be evaluated. And that talks about the future work to be done. We want to scale up the bench work for a larger volume of leachate and dry water hyacinth. Also investigate the densify ratio of water hyacinth and local carbon-based water for briquette production. Briquette production will be used to close the loop of the water hyacinth. And the last aspect is the field application of this setup in a local slum. The essence of this project is to provide a community interaction in which the community are given opportunity to harvest the water hyacinth in exchange of a communal benefit, a filter that they will use at their home. Now, they will also substitute the use of biomass for the use of briquette that will also be created from water hyacinth. And with this, the community will participate in the remediation of the environment. We believe this type of project will help to support a lot of the SDG, especially for the growing slum in Nigeria. Thank you for listening. I would hand over to Professor Parvez for the next session. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Dr. Adilopo, and thank you also to Jonathan Jones and also to Dr. Eid Brima for their excellent presentations. And I mean, they were really, quite amazing in terms of the type and variety of work that has been done. Jonathan, you done some exciting work with a British river, and now we are going to have a sort of panel discussion. And I'll start off with you. I mean, we know that the EU legislation meant that water hyacinth plant is not to be, sort of like sold or imported into the EU. In terms of Brexit and everything that has happened, does this change anything, or is it still a banned species in the UK? Does it mean you can't do research anymore?
Well, it is still a banned plant in the UK, and obviously following EU exit, a lot of the legislation still applies, and if not continuing, will be introduced to be of a similarly protective nature. So unfortunately, it is banned. Well, I say unfortunately, it's for good reason, obviously, but it doesn't mean it can't be used. And obviously, subject to strict controls and obtaining a permit for its use in research. It's not out of the question. It's just how it is done, and with those strict controls in place so that it doesn't escape then into the wild is what the concern is in sort of European countries then.
Sure. Yeah, that's thank you. I would like to ask Dr. Eid Brima with respect to water purification. Your filter seems to be highly effective. I mean, this works for 7 days and arsenic is removed over a period of 7 days. So it looks like an amazing filter, actually. What about, you say something about microbes and other pathogens. You mentioned something about some cloth. I know that in Bangladesh, people wear sari, which is the traditional dress, and I think there was some research in the past where people have shown that it can filter out, toxic, highly infectious microbes. Can you say something about how microbial contamination can be reduced using your filter?
Yeah, actually, you have three layers for that filter. The first one is water hyacinth, and the second is sand, and the third is brick. So you need to separate between these three layers. So that reason was the possible one, like a filter to be there, is actually the cloth. And we thought about sari, which is made it in Bangladesh and available everywhere. We did that as a between layer to keep each layer separate from each other to be mixed, and then also to help us to remove some bacteria and pathogens, because some research and studies previously said that very active material to remove pathogens. I think that's the idea behind using a sari between these layers and helping in removing pathogens.
Question for Dr. Adelopo. Your project is really with human beings, because so far what Jonathan has done and what Dr. Eid Brima has done has been focusing on testing a filter and looking and cleaning up water in the river, but you are actually engaging with the community. So how effective is your engagement with the community? Are you getting some sort of opposition? Are you managing to get the people on board, and so that they can see the value of water hyacinth? Because the image of water hyacinth around the world is that it's a plague, it's a very bad thing. So how are you managing to convince the people that it's worth using the material for a good end?
Yeah, I mean, it's not easy, but with the laboratory experiment, seeing is believing. Once you're able to show a dirty water and you pass through it a filter, and they can see it themselves, not that you're bringing your result from the laboratory, you actually try to show that this is water hyacinth, I've just dried it, look at it, and this is what is happening. The leadership of the community got the first buy-in, then we started the talk. At this moment, we have not done a field application, but the yearning is that if this work to clean up the water, then it's good for us. Let us look at how you go with it.
Yes, I think this is a very good approach. I mean, convincing the people with seeing and believing, I think, can get the people to engage. And as I said, I mean, when you showed that change the polluted water with very dirty water, and then from the leachate, and then you showed how pristine and clear the water was after the water hyacinth root treatment, it was quite amazing. And actually brings back to memory myself. As I said, in Bangladesh, there are these ponds which are used for drinking water and also for having growing fish and things like that. Any pond that is normally has a high number of water hyacinth plants or has water hyacinth plants, the water is very clean and very clear, because a lot of the nutrients and others are taken up by the water hyacinth plant, metals and so on. So it's very clean water. So the picture that you showed brings back memory of what I noticed in some ponds before. Jonathan, what I'd like to ask you is, what do you do with all those, one of the questions anyone would ask is, what do you do with all these water hyacinth roots and water hyacinth plants after you've done the remediation and it's full of cadmium, zinc, lead, and all these arsenic and all these toxic metals? What do you do with them?
Yeah, sure. That being the big elephant in the room, as it were. But obviously, we're talking about water purification using the plants, and when the plant has removed those toxic substances from the water, they're in what would be relatively low concentration compared to what would be in soils or sediments potentially. So there's a variety of uses. If they were in sufficient concentration, obviously we could look at metals recovery. So where significant quantities are removed, you'd look at separation and recovery of metals. And obviously there's a lot of various uses and research for that going on in relation to renewable energy. So the dried material can be briquetted and used in fuel. It can be used in bioethanol production. So there's a variety of after uses then for the plant material beyond remediation there.
Thank you. That's very well thought out plans, because this is one of the big questions. And I think one of the points that Dr. Eid mentioned is that when you have these other very chemical-based approaches, you have resins and you have residues that are left over, sludge, that are much more difficult to handle. And what you suggested here is with phytoremediation with this plant, the material at the end can actually become useful for other utilizations, whether bioethanol production or whether biogas production and so on. So it may have many other applications that may not be easily possible with other methods of remediation, which could be more expensive in terms of the implement and also damage to the environment. Dr. Eid Rima, what I'd like to ask you is, do you see, seriously, do you see that this is something, from your experience, do you really think, what Jonathan has mentioned, what Dr. Abdul Ghani has mentioned, do you really think that there is a potential scope for people to actually have these water hyacinth filters in their homes or in their communities? Do you think this is a way forward? Do you think this can be done?
Actually, based on work what Jason did and Dr. Adilibu did in his country, each one in his country, that's a real field application, and there is a future. There is a potential future for doing remediation for water. Each is not just for arsenic, it is for another heavy metal, as shown by Jonathan. And that's the real field one, which is going to help the community. For Adilibu also, what he showed in his presentation for the river and the slum there, and all this will help actually in helping poor community, because this is available biomaterial everywhere and causing problem. But I believe in myself that nothing created for nothing, and anything has a reason, anything can be benefited from. So now we got a benefit from this water hyacinth, as people before they saw this is just a plague, this is a problem costing them millions of dollars to get rid of it. But now we got it as a goal. This is something very expensive now. So everything is created for a reason, and one day it's going to be benefit when a human discover what's the reason behind its creation.
So in terms of, I wanted to ask you, Dr. Abdul Ghani, in terms of your experience from your research, in terms of what's happening in Nigeria, I've noticed that in some places they are producing bags and other, products from the water hyacinth plant. So there is, sort of a lot of work going on with respect to even oil spills. I think there is some work happening with producing water hyacinth powder, just like what you have done, and then using that to, clean oil spills. And Jonathan mentioned about interest from the coal industry in Wales to, remediate polluted water there, so industrial pollution. So there is a great potential for the water hyacinth plant to remove toxic chemicals, even oil and other pollutants from accidents and so on, and to clean up the environment. In terms of financial incentives and financial benefits, are the community that you're working with, can they benefit in some sort of, apart from cleaning the environment, are there any financial incentives? Can they generate income? Can this be, opportunity to create jobs in the slums as well?
Yeah, the project is actually aimed at creating jobs, creating an interrelated environment, economic and social aspect of their life. For example, the manual harvester, and that's why each time we look at solution and the solution is dissociated from the people affected, there will be more money pumped in. Some set of people will be guiding the money, but the people affected do not feel part of the solution. But when you make people who are involved with the problem part of the solution, they will guide the solution themselves. So the first aspect is to create a manual harvester, which is locally made, being championed by people within that area who are actually a metal creating unit. They exist there already. It is just to divert their attention that you can also create an harvester where you also become a producer and the community benefit from that. Also there, you have women who normally dry their fishes using different form of biomass to dry their fishes. Now we have briquettes from water hyacinth. So there is a communal benefit and economic system being created in a circular economy to carry every other person. The first aspect might be a little funding, a little grant to take off, but the project, we are looking at it as self-sustainable within the community, creating employment and also integrating every aspect of environmental and social benefit.
Thank you very much indeed. That's a very good sort of explanation as to how to make this economically productive for the community as well. And we have some questions coming through from the audience, and one question that has come from Dr. Harpreet Singh is a very good question actually, and he's asking how effective is water hyacinth in purifying irrigation systems, irrigation water from pesticides? We know that there is a lot of applications of water hyacinth, and does anyone want to address this question from the three speakers? Jonathan, Eid, Dr. Abdul Ghani?
Well, it's a good question. As far as I'm aware, there's not a massive amount of research being done on its potential in organics, but there is research there. And I think there's a paper by Zia and Ma where they look at removal of pesticides in the live plants there. And they had some success showing removal at between around 50 and 90 odd %. So again, it shows remarkable potential for a wider range of pollutants other than metals and nutrients.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, the more research we do, the more we will find out, because you have the biomass, the non-living plant being used for, phytoremediation, and also the living plant being used for it. So I think the potentials are huge, and more work needs to be done. Textile dyes, for example, in Bangladesh, textile industry creates a lot of pollutants. The tanning industry in Bangladesh tannery industry in Bangladesh produces a lot of pollutants. And this wastewater can be first treated with the water hyacinth plant, like the structure that Jonathan has shown. And then after that, the water can then be released into the lakes and rivers and the other water bodies. Because at the moment, the water is being put directly into the rivers and lakes, harming the ecosystem, the fish life, and then entry of toxic chemicals into the food chain, so damaging the environment immensely. So these water hyacinth plant, although they are considered to be a plague, although they are considered to be highly invasive, they can serve in purifying the environment, in improving the environment if applied in a thoughtful manner. So we are running out of time, and I like to sort of conclude by thanking the speakers and thanking all those from around the world who have been listening in to this and watching this presentation. We have done our best to show how an abundant plant, which often people call as weed, unwanted, undesirable, a nuisance plant, we've shown how this plant can become an effective resource in improving an environment. I always believe in coexistence, living with your surroundings, living with the environment, living with what we have around us, whether it is plant life, whether it is animal life, and even bacterial and viral life. Because bacteria and viruses, there are good bacteria and there are good viruses. and they also have a role, and we are increasingly realizing that we cannot just kill our way through solving problems. It doesn't really provide a long-term solution. And we know about antibiotic resistance. We know how the overuse of antibiotics is leading to resistant bacteria, which are even more deadlier than the ones that we confronted before. So we need to find ways where we can live and let live, and not do damage to the environment, and we share the resources together with what we have around us, whether it is plant life or animal life. And one of the important points that we have highlighted in this talk today is the fact that research is needed. Research is key to making progress. Scientific research is needed to make progress. Water hyacinth is beginning to be seen as a different, beginning to develop a different image. I've said that it will no longer be treated as a green plague, but it will be seen as a green gem. And this is something that I see happening in the near future. And this is thanks to research, type of work we have done, and more work needs to be done in this front to make this happen. And I want to again stress that whilst it is good to go to space, go to other planets to look for water and find the signs of water, we must also spend money, effort, and research to provide clean water to the billions that are lacking it, especially during these days of the pandemic. When I was showing at the beginning of the presentation, I am lucky to be living in a country where I have access to clean water, but that doesn't happen for a lot of people around the world. Billions do not have this access to clean water. And we have to do more research and more work. And we are doing something small. This is a small group of researchers. We are making our effort to do our bit to providing clean water for people around the world, including our local communities. As Jonathan has shown how we are trying to clean a British river that has been historically polluted because of mining and so forth. So with this, I hope that you all have a great day from wherever you are watching, whether in Europe, Asia, Africa, South America. We hope that our presentations and our lectures have been useful and beneficial for you, and we hope to bring other exciting research findings in the future. And once again, we thank the speakers and everyone listening in. Thank you all, and goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.